Hello, it's Sue Stevenson here. I'm very excited to read a section of the chapter in our wonderful book, Women Leading the Way. And my chapter is titled Loosening the Grip of Anxiety. Okay, here we go. What if there was a way to loosen the grip anxiety has on our world right now? If only I'd known what I know now when I was an anxious child and parent raising my kids. I wouldn't be here writing this story. I'm certain of that. I can't change or remove my own or my daughter's suffering, but I can at least share my experience, and maybe it will resonate with what you or someone you know is going through. For most of my childhood, I believed there was something wrong with me, yet I was quite the chameleon, wearing my good girl, people-pleasing mask to hide the thousands of times my belly felt gripped by a vice. I was too frightened, embarrassed, and ashamed to admit how I really felt inside. Although I had 6 siblings, there were many times I felt completely alone. I would feel so overwhelmed. I'd hide in the bathroom, close my tear-filled eyes, and imagine the world swallowing me up, wishing the pain of my inner turmoil would go away, but it didn't. I spoke to no one about this until I was in my 40s. Until then, I had no idea it was anxiety that had gripped me and made my life confusing and taxing all those years. I developed the coping strategy of internally shutting down and suppressing uncomfortable feelings when I was away from home. Yet my family knew the slightest trigger could escalate my emotional state from 0 to 1,000 in seconds. I hated feeling stressed and anxious, and I became frustrated and impatient when my family mocked or teased me, or when I felt like my thoughts and opinions were simply dismissed. In those moments, I felt powerless, and oftentimes I felt like I just didn't matter. Sometimes I'd get so angry because from my eyes, the situation seemed so unfair. I'd do and say things I often regretted afterwards, especially when my parents punished me for my behaviour. I'd then feel intense embarrassment, guilt, and shame, and I felt like I was a massive disappointment to my parents. Unfortunately, in my adulthood, similar patterns also appeared when my kids especially pushed my buttons. I could be calm and kind toward the students I was teaching all day long, yet for my own kids, some days I had little patience at all. There was no space left to stuff any more emotions in. Instead, regretfully, I'd react and lose my cool, dumping my emotions onto my kids or my husband. How little I understood about what was really going on. Back then, I truly believed it was their fault for upsetting me. Until one pivotal moment back in the year 2000, when my big feeling daughter was 16. After years of struggling to manage her increasingly intense mood swings, and while in the heat of yet another argument, things escalated to the point where everything got out of hand. We both said and did things we regret. She ended up screaming that she hated me and I was too controlling. In her rage, she leant forward, glared directly into my eyes and said, "I just want to kill you." In that moment of shock, fear and panic and despair, I then did something I'm not proud of. I told her to pack her bags and get out. I didn't feel safe in her company, and I felt like I couldn't handle being around her highly reactive and volatile emotional state anymore. I'd reached my threshold. I had unsuccessfully tried to support her with what I later discovered had been anxiety controlling her all those years. We were both very emotionally charged, and after she made a few phone calls while watching her storm off, the reality of what had happened set in. Had I lost my daughter for good? Was this it? I felt gutted. I had become the mother I never wanted to be. A plethora of emotions overcame me in that moment. I felt I had completely failed as a parent. On one hand, I was blaming my daughter for her extreme behaviour, and on the other, I was incredibly disappointed and angry at myself. For many days, I found myself helplessly crying in a heap, not knowing how to dig myself out of the dark hole I found myself in, until I came to the realisation this wasn't about my daughter needing to change. I wasn't a victim. This was about me needing to change. If I wanted to rebuild my relationship with the daughter I still loved immensely, I knew I had to dig deep and find the strength and courage to step up and change myself. After all, this was the same beautiful, emotionally sensitive little girl who used to tell me she loved me so much it hurt. I had to find a way out of this mess. And I did. And this is why I help families now with anxious kids, so that they don't have to go through what I went through with my family. Thank you for listening.